This is the All Things Nerd production.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Botched Rolls from Kobolds in the Basement. So, let's get into it. Just like last time, I am joined with Dave, Dave Morris, who in this first campaign is Caster Flamebeard.
Hey, happy to be here.
Awesome. So this week or this botched roll, we're gonna talk about some differences, pros and cons between uh, the D&D Dungeons and Dragons fifth edition and Tales of the Valiant, which is coming out
In May.
in May. So later
May,
this year,
yep,
2024, from the Cobalt Press.
right. And if our, valued listeners listen to episode 105 of the All Things Nerd podcast, where I was your guest, uh,
Yes.
there was the history. I gave the history of kind of why we're doing this. Where I, just for those who didn't listen to it, and you should, um, where at the end of 2022, early 2023, Hasbro slash Wizard of the Coast tried to do a major cash grab and screw over all the third party publishers for D&D 5e. And me, like a lot of the community, was like, you know what? I don't want anything to do with that anymore. And so I started looking for something very similar to 5e, but at the same time, not published by Wizards or somebody else. So we could transition kobolds over to that, where the players and the DMs will be like, "Hey, this doesn't feel that different," but at the same time, it's not 5e, so it's not supporting, the money grubbers at Hasbro.
Exactly. And I mean, I did back the Tales of the Valiant Kickstarter um because of how much you hyped it up, and I was like, okay, I want like a physical copy of, the game master guide um and all that. But based on what how you backed it and stuff like that, you already had I think some sort of insight into some of the differences. So you sent me kind of like a summary, and you're like, this is kind of some of the main differences. Um,
Yeah, and so you've backed the Game Master's Guide. I backed the original Kickstarter for Tales of the Valiant. So I will be getting the Player's Guide and the Monster book. I can't remember. It's not a Monster Manual because that's Hasbro. It's
Trade.
uh, yeah, it's their version of the Monster Manual though from Cobalt Press.
Mhm.
And one of the things, if anybody else who's listening is familiar with some of the Cobalt Press stuff, their monsters are better designed in general anyway. They're a little more interesting. They have more abilities. They're not just, basic stats in one attack and nothing else. Even their goblins have at least one or two extra abilities compared to the 5e goblins. And so Cobalt Press puts a lot of time and interest into building their monsters and making them more dynamic. And so I'm hopeful that, based on what I've seen from the alpha version of Tales of the Valiant, since I got to see that as a backer, that 5e or that Tales of the Valiant is going to be a more dynamic version of 5e.
Yeah, I mean, the Tales of the Valiant just seems, I don't know how to phrase it uh properly. It just seems like there there's more room for dynamics, whether it's leveling up your characters, creating monsters, the way in which you level up, it just seems almost more like realistic, which sounds weird to phrase it that way, but it makes sense. Like, you can either improve on skills or take a feat,
Well,
depending
you
on
get
the
you get to do
level.
both in Tales of the Valiant. When you
Right.
level up, you get, a feat. Your normal choice is a feat and one ability score plus one, as opposed to the 5e where it's normally just plus two to ability scores, and feats technically are only an optional rule in 5e. They're not even part of the core rules.
Right. And also, taking feats in 5e, like it seems like it's more limited as to when you can take them as opposed to Tales of the Valiant, which I like. I'm really intrigued by the more like flexible growth aspect for characters
Yeah.
because I haven't been playing D&D like all that long. Um, so I'm more intrigued by like the development stages of like characters and the storytelling, um as opposed to like the strict rules. And I feel like Tales of the Valiant really opens up like a nice like mesh between the two, where you can do certain things that would make more sense for your character instead of having to wait for a certain level to do that.
But I mean, you're still going to have that because you only get feats every 4 levels, like you do in 5e. But I think the feats are not as taking a feat isn't as punishing in Tales of the Valiant as it is in 5e, where sometimes you take a feat and you get no ability score changes, and you're almost holding yourself back to gaining these abilities. Where in Tales of the Valiant, you're getting a feat and a plus one no matter what. And I think it's just going to open up a lot more flexibility and more, as long as the feats are balanced, like they appear, more diversity in characters. Like there's not going to be feats that are you have to take these as much. Uh,
Right.
that's the one of the problems with 5es, especially for martial characters. There's almost like you have to take one of these feats, or you're just not going to keep up with anybody else.
Yeah, and for those listening that might not know what that means, what is like a martial character, Dave?
So martial characters are your more combat, direct combat oriented ones. So these are your fighters, your barbarians, to a lesser extent, your paladins and rangers. The ones who their main job is to hit or shoot something in combat, where versus casting spells. And so, right now in 5e, casters can not only do more damage than the martial characters with their big spells, but they can just do everything else with their spells. And the marshals are like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go hit this thing 3 times. That's it."
Right.
Whereas the caster's like, "I'm gonna drop this big spell that not only does a lot of damage, it also melts them next turn with acid."
So it seems like with Tales of the Valiant, uh, it just almost like levels the playing field across the party. Not That's a weird way
Well,
to phrase it, where
it, I'm
it's not
I'm
like diminishing one, but it's kind of like bringing the martial characters like up to that same level playing field.
it's hopefully going to level the playing field, because it has so much of 5e in it. I'm hoping that Cobalt Press in their final version balances some of the spells a little more. There's been a lot of talk about that. The only system I've seen that does a good job of balancing both, marshals and casters is Pathfinder 2. And I didn't want to move us to that system because I think that would be really jarring, especially for like Shalone and Steven who haven't played a lot of campaigns. And Also, for us who use Roll20, the online interface just isn't as friendly. We'd have to do a lot more stuff building in manually for Pathfinder 2. It's a great system. I really like it. I think we could probably do a one shot sometime with it, but I think it would be too much of a change. I wanted something that that you and Shalone and Steven are going to be like, hey, this feels just like what we were doing. And for the most part, it will be, but there's just going to be new classes, new abilities, but all the rules are going to be exactly the same for the most part. A couple of cool changes here and there, like the luck system, which I'm excited to try out.
Yeah, speaking of that, the luck system, that was something that you know, had sent me some information on because again, I was not an early backer of this. So explain what it is. It seems, because in 5e there are luck points for like certain classes, subclasses, races, things like that.
Yeah, it's the one feat.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, in 5e there is the lucky feat, which gets you 3 luck points a day that you can use to re-roll a roll, or make somebody who attacked you re-roll a roll. The only other thing that's close is what halflings have, where if you roll a natural one, you get to re-roll it.
Yeah.
But the thing that the luck system compares to more, or what it's more replacing, is the inspiration system. Not what bards do. That's different. This is that little checkbox at the top of a character sheet that nobody remembers. It's this thing where the DM could reward a player for doing something amazing, either in role playing or combat or something. And then you say, hey, you get an inspiration for this, which you get to use that and gain advantage on one roll. What the luck point does is it's something that triggers when you like roll a natural one, or there's a couple other triggers for it. But when you get to accumulate them, and you can have up to 5. And on a roll, you can then spend luck points. You can spend 1 luck point to increase your roll by 1, or up to 5. You could, if you really wanted to push that roll, you could add 5 to that roll and then use all your luck points up. Or you can spend 3 luck points and get a reroll. Now, the only trigger is if you have 5 luck points and you do something that would earn you a new one, it resets it and you got to roll a d4 to figure out how many luck points you have again. So it's encouraging you to use them a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, that first off just sounds really interesting. Now, it say you use 3 luck points to re-roll. If it's a lesser roll, do you take the lower of the two, or do you use it like as advantage?
I think it's a reroll. I don't think it's advantage, because
Okay.
then you'd be able to stack double advantage, which not really fair.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That was something as I was reading through some of my notes here about some of the differences that I was like, is it like a true reroll or
Yeah.
more like you take the higher of the two?
So I have
But I
the
guess if you were to use, you know, 3 luck points to re-roll because your first attempt didn't succeed and you rolled lower, it doesn't make much of a difference in that instance.
Yeah. So well, here it is. I just pulled it up from the alpha document I have. So gaining luck points. So you gain when you fail an. It's not even natural. It's when you fail an attack roll, save, or saving throw. You gain a luck point. The GM can award a luck point for doing something really cool, excellent role playing, or can award luck points for surviving a really difficult encounter or something.
Mhm.
And then let's see, spending luck points. Immediately after you make an ability check, attack roll, or save, you can spend 3 luck points to re-roll a single d20 used for that roll. So, what it would let you do, it doesn't give you an additional one. You don't get to re-choose. But if you were rolling with advantage or disadvantage, you could replace one of those rolls. So, say you're rolling with disadvantage and you rolled like a natural one and something else, you could then spend 3 luck points and re-roll that natural one, so you don't get the one on your.
Okay. No, I mean it sounds really cool. I'm really intrigued to because this is something that we've talked about for it's going to be uh like a slow transition I think for campaign 1, but when we get to campaign 2 we're going to be solely using Tales of the Valiant because
Yeah,
to put it bluntly, screw Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. um
yeah, and so we can start when Tails officially releases in May. We can start using the additional rules and everything. And the nice part is Tails is 100% compatible with 5e. So Shalone, Steve, and I, we don't have to change our characters for any reason. It doesn't
right.
change our classes or subclasses or spells, anything like that. We just keep them as is, but then we can start using some of the roles and rules for Tales of the Valley instead, like the luck system or other changes they might make.
and
And
and some of those changes with along the lines of characters is you know leveling up, and then also in the future when get to the point of like campaign 2, or if there happens to be like I don't want to see TPK, but like
a player death, a
yeah,
character
player
death.
character death. um Maybe not the full party, but um they're the because we started off with the point buy system for
Hmm.
this campaign, and that's right off the bat. That I mean, that's a I don't want to say a massive change, but
Well,
the point buy starts off with more points to stack your character or build your character, and
it
same
does,
where
but
your
but that
max score can be.
yeah, but it's not as different because your point buy it has more points because you don't get extra +1 or +2 to abilities from your race in Tales of the Valiant. So that extra +1, +2 that Cass got from being a dwarf isn't there. It's already baked into those extra ability score point by points in Tales of the Valiant.
Okay.
But I could have started Cass with an 18 in a score with Tales of the Valiant because they allow that. It just costs a lot of points.
Right. That was another thing from the notes is, just you get 5 more points to start with that point buy system, but to go from a 70, uh, like a 17 in a skill slot to an 18 cost 3 of those points.
Yeah.
Also, what's really cool is that, instead of like race and sub race, they're incorporating like lineage and heritage that's not necessarily tied to that race. And one example that you had given me is that you can have like a woodland dwarf, or like an elf that grew up like in a very rocky or mountainous environment, um instead of more traditional history for these races and sub races.
Yeah, you have your lineage, which is what your race you are. So that's your elves, your dwarfs, or whatever else. And then you have your heritage, which is where you grew up. So you could, like you said, you could have an elf who grew up underground. Maybe they were an orphan, raised at a dwarfenage,
It's got
and
orphanage.
and we're and you know So then they've developed some of the more dwarven abilities, like they still have the dark vision because they're an elf, but then some dwarves have better understanding of like stone cutting and masonry and stuff because that's what they do when they live underground. So this instead of having some of the more elven skills like keen perception stuff, this elf would have proficiency with like masonry tools and stuff. And it allows for somebody like me who's building the world for campaign 2, not using an existing one, to come up with my own uh heritage for characters. So I'm not going to invent races. I think that's going to be a little bit probably too much for me to tackle. But I can invent heritage to represent the places in the world for campaign 2.
Yeah.
And then backgrounds are a little bit better too, because in 5e right now, most backgrounds, with the exception of the ones that have come out in the last few books, give you some skills and that's it. Now, some of the later books like Spelljammer and everything after, some of the backgrounds give you a feat.
Right.
In Tales of the Valiant, you pick a background which is kind of your job training that you've had to this point. So, lineage is your genetics. Heritage is where you grew up, and then your background is like, hey, this is what training and stuff I've had so far. So that'll give you skills, but it also gives you pick one of like 3 feats to take based on that background. So it's not pick any feat. It's hey, you were a thief. Pick one of these feats as part of your background.
Right. And just from the notes that I'm seeing is I could be wrong. Um, they're referred to as like more talent and
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's
They call them talents instead of feats, just to differentiate them a little bit. But
probably avoid some Hasbro hammer suits.
probably, and they're also in specific lists. Like there is a arcane talent list, a uh, skill, or I can't remember what they call it now. I can just hear Max jumping upstairs. Let's see, because I have it open. It's like talents. Come on, jump to the page. Yeah, magic. They call it magic talents, and then martial talents, and then technical talents. So, so those 3 lists, you're depending on what class you play, you only have access to like maybe one of those lists of talents.
Okay.
So not everybody can take the same feats as everybody else because you might not have ability. Now, certain subclasses will open up you access to those other lists, like the uh, Tale of the Valiant caster fighter. Hi, Max. They have so they call it a spell blade. So it's the rough equivalent of the Eldritch Knight in 5e.
Okay.
And it by taking that subclass, you get access to the magic talent list as well. Whereas a normal uh, fighter would not.
Okay.
So that's how they open up more talent lists to you by saying, "Hey, if you take this subclass, then you can take these other feats." But it also kind of is nice. It prevents somebody like I don't know, say Valyrian from taking sharpshooter. He wouldn't have access in Tale of the Valiant because that's probably a martial feat,
Okay.
or would be a martial feat in Tales of the Valiant. But he doesn't, and a rogue doesn't get access to the martial list
Okay.
unless they took the subclass that would give it to him, which Arcane Trickster does not.
Yeah. I really like that because it forces I think more on like a role play and in a situation where you try to utilize a little bit more of theater of the mind like we've been trying to do as opposed to just here's a map, click, drag, do what you want to do. Um, it it makes your background so much more important.
Yeah, because it's going to give you could potentially take a background which gives you access to a feat that you don't normally have access to.
Yeah, that's really I find that really interesting. Uh for those reasons. Because again, for myself, like I I want like a compelling story.
Yeah, yeah, I just looked it up. Yeah, rogues only have access to the technical talents list to start off. They can't access the martial talents without probably some. There's probably a subclass that does, but uh, the base class does not. Uh, they have a subclass called the Enforcer, which I'm guessing might get it, but yeah, the Enforcer subclass gains access to the martial talent list.
Oh,
So you're a mob enforcer, you get martial talents.
and that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just I don't not gonna, you know, name names, but from you've run a couple of campaigns that I've been a player in
Mm-hmm.
over the past several years. Um, and there's I've tried personally to like develop some sort of backstory for all of my characters.
Yeah.
But then in those instances, they're a little bit more of a casual game. So they're, some people don't, I guess, put as much effort into their background, like, who their character is. And I feel like Tales of the Valiant really almost, I don't want to say forces you to think about it, but it encourages you to be more mindful about your background and stuff like that to build the character that you want to build.
Yeah.
I think
And
is really cool.
yeah, and if you've read some of the previews for the Game Master Guide, one of the sections they have previewed the topics for is, how do you work with this type of player? And they give like archetypes, and one of them is the power gamer, the people who are the pure min maxers.
Yeah.
So that they're, so Cobalt Press is thinking about it's like, hey, not everybody goes full, Shakespearean tragedy background when they're creating their character. Some people just want to smash stuff, and so they're coming up with sections on, hey, how do you work with that?
Oh, I am so stoked for Tales of the Valiant to come out. It I think that it's going to be an incredible replacement for 5e without shaking the foundations of people that may have been much more of the casual player beforehand. Um, yeah, man, I'm
Yeah,
I'm so excited about it.
yeah. And I showed you guys like the character sheet for, a blank character sheet for Tales of Valiant, and I was like, hey, can you guys really tell the difference between this and a 5e sheet? And when you look at it, you're like, there's not enough difference really that.
Yeah, a slightly different layout, but other than that, everything is still there, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's the best one for us, because this is like Steven's technically second full campaign.
Hmm.
Shallone's first, kind of. She's had the job board.
Yeah, she did some one shots, but
Yeah, and trying to transition them to like a whole other system, I think it would hurt them enjoying it, and as well as us trying to tell a good story because we spend too much time on new rules. What's that?
I think that it would, you know, hurt me as like on first off as the GM for this campaign transitioning partway through the campaign into it. I think I would have a really hard time if it was more drastic of changes.
Mm-hmm.
But also as a player, even though I've been playing for several years and have, gone through a campaign, like a full campaign, multiple one shots that we kind of created into a job board slash mini campaign. I think that I would still struggle with more drastic changes. So I think that what Cobalt Press is doing with this uh, is, I think it's a perfect transition, and I really like the changes that I have seen so far for this.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is going to be fun for everybody who's going to be the players in campaign 2 and beyond is when we get there, it's all new subclasses. It's not the same old subclasses that we've seen. Technically, these will all be new options, things for us to explore, new potential abilities and combinations and stuff that we've never seen because you know we didn't buy all the Cobalt. We didn't buy like Midgard or the Tome of Heroes from Cobalt Press, and I'm holding off on that because I'm just waiting for Tales of the Valiant to see how much is merged into it.
Right.
Because that was where the beer domain cleric came from. Was from Tome of Heroes.
Okay.
So we had those NPCs in the one job board that had that were that. And so, yeah, I think it's just going to be really exciting across the board with Tales of the Valley because it's going to be familiar. We're not going to feel like we're reinventing the wheel, but we've just changed the tire on this wheel. It's brand new tread, lots of new stuff for us to figure out, but not in a bad way.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. It's not reinventing, but just kind of modifying. Um, but taking the things that work and not trying to redo that, but just updating it. It's uh since you said wheel and tire and stuff like that, my mind went to just the car world. Um, it's like going from a Honda to an Acura. Like pretty much the same.
Yeah,
But
under the chassis is all the same.
yeah, but the base of each, there's a noticeable enough difference to influence your decision to go with one or the other, but the overall mechanics still work the same.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was originally they were targeting April for Tales of the Valiant release, but then they came out and said, "Hey, we've got more pages than we originally anticipated, so we're going to need more time to finish the layouts."
Yeah,
So if you're going to give a reason for delay, that hey, we need 30 more pages in each of these books, that's a pretty good one.
exactly. 1 second. I need to feed my dog really fast. I figure probably about 15, 20 more minutes.
Yeah, I just got to go. I got to make Max dinner here in a little bit.
Okay, cool. Give me 1 second. I apologize. Sorry for the interruption, dear heroes, but I just have to ask. Are you like me and my friends, where your food tends to be lacking just a little something extra? If you are, then look no further than Crybaby Craig's hot sauce to fix all of your spicy and saucy needs. Because this pickled habanero and garlic hot sauce will go on practically anything. It was started by Craig himself in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, and this sauce has become a staple of all hot sauces and flavor enhancers across the lands for many, many moons. If you don't believe me, go and check out crybabycraigs.com and order yours today to, quite frankly, just better your life, or at least your taste buds. But be sure to let them know that we sent you and enjoy the best damn hot sauce there is. Now, let's get back to the show. Uh, so another thing that I saw, and maybe you can explain it a little bit better, is like with the magic that's available in Tales of the Valiant. From the notes that you'd sent me about this, like rings instead of levels.
Yeah. So one of the probably the most confusing things in 5e is that it's like my wizard is level 3, but I can only cast level 2 spells. And
Yeah.
so they've renamed the spell casting instead of spell levels, they're spell rings,
Okay.
just to eliminate some of the confusion. Your progression is going to be the same. Now, granted, they're going to what's been proposed more in what you see in the next edition of Dungeons and Dragons, whatever they call it. They're going with more just pure lists instead of class specific spell lists. So you're going to have your arcane list, your divine list, your primal list, and then Tales of Valiant's also previewed what they call it's either going to be the occult or the weird WYRD list for like warlocks and stuff. So instead of having saying, "Hey, this is just the random spells your warlock has access to," here's the entire list, but it's you know not just specific to just warlocks. Some other classes might have only use that one.
Okay. And then also for like, I know that in the the campaign that we don't record, where I'm a player in and you're the GM for it. Um, my character can cast ritually.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
from the notes here, it looks like the rituals are like a separate list and only is limited to the classes.
So yeah, so rituals are different. Instead of them being a specific spell that you would have to have, in your case as a druid for your character, prepared to be able to ritual cast it. Now you have a set number of rituals that you can know from your spell list. And that is always there, and it's separate from your other non-ritual casting spells.
I love that so much. Because I know like my character knows a handful of like ritual spells that he can cast, but it's like how like where what ones do I need to have prepared without taking away from you know the ones that just take an action uh
Right.
to cast, and trying to balance that based on the type of encounters that we've had, what we might be walking into, what I've been using more or less of. So it would be something separate.
Yeah, so you have a list of like, I'm the cleric in the Tales of Valhalla says, hey, you can prepare, you know, spells equal to your cleric level plus your wisdom modifier. But then there's now a ritual list that shows you how many rituals you can have known based on your class level. So a fifth level cleric can have 3 rituals known that don't count towards their prepared normal spells
Oh,
of the day.
okay.
So you get to learn more spells, though it's a smaller list, and they're only castable, I think, as a ritual.
That oh, I love that. That was one thing that I always found weird. Not always, because it's the first time that I've had a character that can ritually cast, but just having that ability to ritually cast something and not take a spell slot made sense. But the fact that would take away from the number of spells that you could have prepared for the day or in between long rests, however you want to look at it, always kind of confused me because like if you know how to do it ritually, why would it take away from something that you could prepare at the same time?
Well, I mean, I get the logic because for like a druids or clerics, you're just basically talking to your deity at the beginning of the day and picking your spells of that day. The one class that does this kind of normally in 5e is the wizard. The
Right.
wizard, if it's in their spell book, because they actually have a physical book with all their spells in it, they don't have to prepare that to ritually cast it because they have the book with them.
Right.
So this is closer to that, except it's a nice happy medium between the two for non-wizards. It's like, hey, you can prepare one ritual, you know, from your divine list as a level one cleric and not have to worry about taking up one of your, at best, let's say 16 wisdom, four known spells. So you could take detect magic and then four other spells.
Right. I I am so I've said it before tonight.
And
I'm so ready for Tales of the Valiant. I think that I
honestly, I think
think
that's a rule we could transition in when we switch.
yeah. I think that that's something that we should. Um
I don't know if it's going to affect all of us. I think right now it only affect Shallone's character probably. I don't because I haven't seen the Tales of the Valiant has not previewed their paladin and has not shown all their rogue subclasses. So I don't know if like an arcane trickster or a paladin would have ritual abilities because they don't normally in 5e.
mhm.
But it would allow Shalone. And if you we just released episode what 4 and 5 recently, there was one instance where my character Cass was literally asked, he's like, "Do you have detect magic?" And Shalone's like, "No." Now she would have been able to have that regardless without sacrificing one of her other spells.
Right. Yeah, I really like that. Um and then also another thing that you had sent over to me in, some of these spark notes about the difference between like monsters and stuff like that and doom points.
Oh, Doom points I think are gonna be fun.
Yeah,
So
explain those.
so Doom points are for special monster abilities that bigger, more powerful monsters are gonna have. So in the alpha, they have this example of this thing called come on, stop jumping, a husk demon, and it has this one ability called. Of course, it's on the other page. It's like split page. Um, yeah, it has this. There's abilities that like say, hey, Doom uses that, and so it can only use that if it has a Doom point. Now, granted, monsters start with a Doom point, so they get one use of it regardless. But then uh, they can do something else with these Doom points, and then if somebody rolls a natural one against the monster's either attack or if the monster forces a saving throw and they fail, then the monster gets its Doom point back.
Okay. Yeah, because from what the notes that I have say, that they can use a doom point to like have advantage on a specific roll,
Yeah,
uh,
they can use
or
it.
force
Yeah,
disadvantage on like a saving throw from one of their attacks.
yeah, that's the other uses monsters with Doom points have is they can say I'm gonna attack and they're like I'm gonna the GM could be like I'm gonna use the Doom point to give it advantage on this attack, or I'm gonna it's like if it was some kind of something with a breath weapon, it could breathe it out and go, I'm going to use my doom point so you, Chad, have disadvantage on this saving throw.
Woof. So it sounds similar to like legendary actions or reactions, but with a little extra spice.
Well, no, there's still legendary actions and all that. This is more of a kind of the monster version of luck points.
Okay. Could they uh now could a monster that has like a legendary action or reaction stack a doom point or like a doom ability on top of this?
Yeah, but then for right now, I think in all the preview, most monsters only can hold one doom point at a time.
Okay.
So they can't just keep dumping them on them. Now I could see higher level, really nasty things having maybe three doom points or something. But again, once it uses them, unless people are rolling natural ones, they're not getting them back. It's not like legendary actions that recharge every turn.
Right, but with something like this, if they, because you said like on, if they force disadvantage and you fail, that they get the doom point back.
No, they don't get it back automatically. But if they force disadvantage and you roll a nat one,
Okay, that was
then they
that was where I was going with it. Uh,
then they would get the doom point back, but not automatically.
okay,
So it still doesn't gain it back all the time. You people have to roll. There's going to be encounters where monsters get their doom abilities back all the time because the players are just having a bad day, and then there's going to be fights where the monsters get to use that doom point once, and that's
okay,
it because no more nat ones are rolled.
right. Oh, I think that that's a really cool aspect too. Um, are there, from what you've seen, are there other additional like optional, uh, GM rules that where monsters can regain that doom point other than a nat one?
So I found it now. Here's like so yeah, they call Doom is an optional rule to begin with. We don't have to use it, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's really cool too. I
Yeah,
think
so, yeah, so yeah, it says at the start of each encounter, the game master gains a special resource called Doom based on the challenge rating of the monster. So the higher the monster, the more likely they're going to have Doom points and maybe more than one. Um, so the GM can spend Doom in the following ways: give a creature advantage on attack roll, give a PC disadvantage on a save. Um, once per counter, once per encounter they could also use a Doom point to refresh, recharge, or otherwise gain one additional use of a limited use feature. So
it's
they
like a breath weapon.
yeah, they could use a Doom point if to recharge a breath weapon.
I like this. I like where this is going until I'm a player and then I'm facing it and then I'm not gonna like it. But
Yeah. Yeah, or yeah, breath weapon, a legendary creature's legendary resistance, or a spell on a mage's spell casting.
wait, say that again.
You could also use a Doom point to gain a legendary resistance back, or if it's a high level spellcaster, give them another spell slot back.
Okay.
So those are all examples, and they say it's an exists to give some extra staying power, particularly powerful foe, crafty or resourceful PC. It doesn't have to be used in every encounter.
So in theory, an enemy with a doom point that also has counterspell could theoretically use their doom point to get back an additional counterspell.
Well, it'd be using that because if they have counterspell, they're using a spell slot.
Right.
So you could use their Doom point to gain that spell slot back.
Woof.
Yeah, and they give suggestions like how many Doom points based on the challenge rating of the monster. So like 0 to 4 would only have like one Doom point potentially, and not every monster in those challenge ratings even have them.
Okay.
But like a challenge rating 5 to 8 might have two. But when it gets really interesting is like when you get up to like challenge rating 17 to 20, they could have up to five.
For myself and the listeners, what are some examples of monsters that would fall under that umbrella?
Challenge rating 17,
Yeah.
you're looking at or adult dragons.
Okay.
That kind of level is like for that high a challenge rating. Let's see, they had a couple examples in here. Let's see, a young black dragon is challenge rating 7, so they would have like one, maybe two. But then they have, let's see, this one is a adult red dragon is challenge rating, and it just keeps jumping because it's right at the top of the page. It's challenge rating 17.
Oof.
So it could have 5 doom points potentially.
That that's wild.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could, as we switch, I'm gonna, recommend and for we try to use only Cobalt Press monsters when we switch. Because we'll have the monster manual from them. I think they're calling it like the monster guide. We'll have that from them in on Roll 20 because it's part of my Kickstarter package.
Yeah.
And then we'll have access to we can use the SRD, the standard release document, 5e monsters just to have access to them because that's part of the Creative Commons.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah, they have a 5e Creative Commons, so we can still keep that access because then it's free to use. But then all these Cobalt stuff, press monsters, we could start using, and we could start using Doom.
Yeah. I like the sound of that. And also, I mean, there's just another thing that you had mentioned to me with like, the monsters like stats and abilities that they tend to be stronger and have more abilities than standard, wizards monsters.
Yeah,
Can you explain that? And I know that it ties back into, like the character development for player characters because they have, more points to buy with, so and the fact that, you can either do a, gain a feat and still get +1 to a skill, or just take the, the +2 and stuff like that. So I know that it correlates, but can talk about how, some of the monsters from the Cobalt Press and Tails the Valiant are, or
the
I
same,
guess
the same but different.
yeah, like,
So,
explain that.
yeah, I mean, while the stats are going to be about the same for player characters, characters are intended to have more feats, which is going to give them more abilities, more cool stuff. And then, for our campaign too, where I'm GMing, I'm, giving you ideas that I'm going to bolt on even more on top of that. Like once a day abilities for stuff that I'm going to more or less borrow from fourth edition because
Yeah,
nobody really talks about that anyway. They don't really like no, fourth edition's the hidden edition of D&D anyway.
yeah,
But a good example, we'll go with the classic, creature from D&D, which is the goblin.
yeah,
So a goblin in 5e, is like armor class 15 with 7 hit points, and they have some kind of it's like a short sword and a short bow, and they both have +4 to hit, and they do 1d6 +2 damage. So that's your 5e goblin. Hard to hit, which makes it tough for early players, but they go down easy.
right.
The same goblin from Tales of the Valiant, armor class 15, same weapon loadout, 12 hit points. So they have 5 more hit points per goblin, And then they also have uh, an extra ability. They have Gang Up. So once a day, the goblin can move up to half its speed towards a creature it can see. Each friendly goblin within 30 feet of the goblin can use its reaction to join the gang up and move half its speed towards the same target. It doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. If the initiating goblin is within 5 feet of the target must make a DC 12 deck save or take 5 bludgeoning damage on a failed save. So it basically, and then they also have the more racial goblin ability of Nimble Escape, which lets them take the disengage or hide as a bonus action.
Right.
Whereas the 5e goblins don't have that.
Okay.
So they're more mobile, they have more hit points, and they have this once a day ability where they can dogpile onto somebody.
I mean, I can see it both from a GM and a player. Like, that's rad, but could be problematic,
Yeah.
especially for lower level players.
Well, yeah, and in the Game Master's Guide from Tales of Valiant, there's going to be guidance for better designing encounters based on
Okay.
player level and challenge rating. That's one of probably the biggest flaws of 5e is you can take, according to the math, if you have 4 level 1 players, then 4 goblins should be a good fight for them. When in reality, that could be a TPK really easily
Yeah.
because goblins hit and they're harder to hit. And so I'm really curious to see how Cobalt Press tackles that because I think they may have to adjust challenge ratings on certain creatures. Uh, like a goblin might end up being like a 1/2 versus a 1/4. So it would take 2 goblins is a good match for what level 1 players instead of 4,
Right.
or maybe 1/3 or something. Just because 1-on-1, a goblin can take a level 1 player in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really excited to get my copy of the GM guide. Uh,
Yeah, that should be releasing. I think it's like September or October this year
okay.
is their targeted date for that, and it's hit a lot of its Kickstarter extra things.
Yeah. I think I'm getting the PDF version. I think something that I can upload to Roll20. And
So
a hard
they haven't released anything for the VTT versions of the Game Master's Guide yet.
okay, then not that.
It's just gonna be digital like maps. I think is the extra little.
That's what it is because I've gotten a couple of emails, um, you know, Kickstarter updates.
Yeah, yeah, I've gotten them too. I only did the digital for them. Uh, but yeah, they've said there's unlike the original Kickstarter, which was the launch. There's not a virtual tabletop option. They're going to release that separately.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's Char.
Yeah.
She might be already on her way home. I made her go cook dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Hello, hello. Okay. Okay. You would get a 4 out of 5. Okay, well, we'll see you soon. He and I haven't eaten yet just because we ate, so late on lunch. Bye. So apparently it was a good tie, but not spicy enough.
Ah,
She got a 5 out of 10 where she used to get a 4 out of 5. So
oof.
yeah. And so the Tales book is going to be it's the Monster Vault is what they're calling it.
Okay. Well, for our listeners, we'll keep you all up to date on more things, Tales of the Valiant, as they become available, and we will start transitioning into that rule guide as we go. Also, well, I guess if you're still listening to this, that means that you are already a subscriber on buymeacoffee.com, and we appreciate that so much. And uh, keep your eyes peeled. We'll have more of these botched rolls um, as we make our way through the campaign and as more news becomes available for all things tabletop RPG and virtual become available. You all
Yeah.
have a good night, and thank you.
Well, I will say, probably in the upcoming episodes of Botched Rolls, I think we can start maybe previewing the world of campaign 2.
Yeah, I
I,
think that that's one thing I really want us to tackle in the future is the one just the process of home brewing because uh by the time this comes out, we may or may not have gotten to the our first homebrewed monster in campaign 1, but Dave here is doing a full-on homebrew world and everything, and that I'm so excited for it from the little that he's uh, told me about. So I think that we should definitely tackle that in upcoming botched rolls. But yeah,
yep.
thank you everyone, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Talk to you guys, everybody later.